self-determination is a right in international law and in South African law
Yes.
for ethnic and or cultural or language groups. Doesn't the South African government have an obligation towards those minorities, in your opinion?
I think it does. I mean, it's in the South African Constitution. As you say, the International Covenant on Self-Determination, specifically, it's Article 1, that all peoples have the right to self-determination.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems, of course, is that the UN Charter, even though it starts off with "we the peoples of the United Nations," immediately descends into an organization that is made up of nation states, not peoples. It's why I especially appreciate the work, for instance, of this organization for unrepresented peoples. Because the truth is, the world is made up of so many more peoples than nations. And the richness of people's cultures needs to be recognized. Now, there are a lot of ways to do that. The big problem, of course, with self-determination is always how do you get a nation to accept it? Because often it is seen as a secessionist movement. My advice here would be, don't let your movement here be seen as a secessionist movement. Instead, let it be seen as a movement to protect, defend Afrikaner culture, to, in fact, even achieve some kind of an autonomy within Afrikaner culture. And remember, we don't live in a totalitarian society, thank God. I mean, there are some, like Malema, who would love to make it into that. But we still live in a society in which there are multiple ways in which people hold power. And it's not just the government. So Afrikaners can continue to hold power in many, many other realms in this society and continue to have their own societies, their own cultural movements, their own cultural groups, and so forth. And it should be absolutely encouraged, of course. I mean, in the United States, we adopted a system that was even more radical, as you know, and that's federalism. We realized that our states were so different from each other that we better have separate governments for each of the states. And so we even reserve certain powers to those states. Most criminal law, for instance, is a state law, it's not federal law. I encouraged, when we were talking about the new South African Constitution, I encouraged them to have a federal system, but they wouldn't buy it. They said if we have a federal system, it's just going to be like the Bantustans, and we don't want that. So let's not have a federal system. So they want to have it all centralized. And I said, that is going to really create problems in South Africa. And it has. Because especially here, where you've got ethnic groups that are really quite different from each other, way more different than people in Georgia ever were from people in Massachusetts. By the way, Georgia was settled by criminals, I hope you know. It was just like Australia, we've always said this about Georgians. Anyway, we like to remind them about this. But, the differences between the cultures here in South Africa are far greater even than they are in the United States.
Yeah.
Our Native American populations, on the other hand, have truly different nationalities almost compared to ours. And we, at first, tried to treat them as separate nations until we realized that wasn't working. And so in the American Indian Civil Rights Act of 1922, Indians were finally given the right to vote, in federal elections. They also have their own tribal governments in their own reservations and so forth, which is a form of federalism. So I don't know exactly what the future will bring for South Africa, but surely it must include respect for and protection of cultures that may be not popular with some of the majority people, but nevertheless need to be really cherished.
Yes.